Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I would like to have a simple, but hopefully fun and intriguing conversation about how Nintendo has been squandering the full potential of Mario Kart World for now. And to be clear, I'm not trying to say Mario Kart World is an unplayable game or anything like that since the update. I love Mario Kart World, even post-update. This is an amazing game. But what I am trying to say here is that there is a game within Mario Kart World that's an even better experience than what we have currently. And I'm not trying to talk about how through DLC, like with new characters and tracks, the game can be improved upon. Of course, and I think eventually that is going to happen. It's pretty much a given, I would say. What I'm getting at here is that with the content that's already available with Mario Kart World, Nintendo is not fully utilizing what can actually be done in this game. There is far more to enjoy. And yes, some of this does have to do with the recent update of Mario Kart World to version 1.1.2, but it's just the beginning of the conversation. It's far more than that, and today I want to get into how all this potential is being squandered and how it can be fixed, and that, yes, I do think it's likely that it will be fixed. But before going forward, let me point out I am aiming for a goal of 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So with the version 1.1.2 update, there were some stability changes and the overall flow of the game has been improved, but there is one particular change that is causing an uproar, and it has to do with how random works with the online Grand Prix mode. So normally, when you enter the online Grand Prix mode, you are given 4 different choices. 3 obvious choices in terms of tracks that are surrounding you, different intermission tracks. Sometimes you can pick a track further away. You can see a track, and basically how it works is that you're going from the point you are on at the map to that other track elsewhere on the map. And so it's an intermission track, how most of the tracks work in the Grand Prix of Mario Kart World. However, with random, it would randomly select one of the 30 main tracks of the game, and if this random choice is selected, you wouldn't be playing an intermission track where you're racing from one point of the map to another, as most of the tracks work in Mario Kart World's Grand Prix, but actually you get to enjoy a 3-lap circuit. This is a consistent way to play a different version of these tracks, a version that's more like how prior Mario Kart games would work, and there are a lot of purists that are unhappy about this change. Some people going so far as to say that the game is now no longer playable. Now, personally, I don't think this change is really that big of a deal, because you can still enjoy these 3-lap circuits, and it's only impacting the random choice. It's making random more random, where, yeah, you can still in theory get a 3-lap circuit, but you also can get any one of the different routes you can experience throughout the Grand Prix. So really, they actually fixed random to be actually random. And so I actually don't have a problem with this change. But what I think they need to do is offer a way to consistently play the 3-lap circuits online. I do think there's something that needs to be fixed there. But I want to highlight something that I think a lot of people overlook. When you're playing the online Grand Prix mode, it's not just the typical Grand Prix you see in offline mode when you're playing locally. There's a bit more that's going on here. It actually works a little bit how it works in Versus Race. So in Versus Race, the selection options are a bit different. There's just random, but then there's also open and connected. And I've seen some confusion online about how this works as well. All this means is the method of selection. If you pick open in Versus Race, what that means is when you finish a race, you can select any other track within the entire map. Connected, which is basically how it works online as well, is that you can only pick a track that's connected to the current track. So an intermission track. However, in Versus Race, what's interesting is that yes, you can pick a variety of different options to race through from one track to another, but there is also an option to just race the base track itself, that typical 3-lap circuit. So looking at the menu, it's just the first option, and everything else you see the arrows where it's from that track to another, all the different intermission tracks. And so what's interesting about this is there's actually a whole bunch of different paths and tracks you can take that far exceed the amount of different routes you can explore in just the typical Grand Prix mode in Mario Kart World. And so what I don't think a lot of people realize about the online version of Grand Prix mode, it's more like Versus Race than Grand Prix mode actually. So what's happening is that you're able to enjoy any one of these different random routes throughout the game. Of course, there is the random selection and there's a voting process, so you can't pick any one particular way significantly, and because the intermission tracks greatly outweigh the standard 3-lap circuit, most of the time you're going to get the 3-lap circuit. So again, I still believe Nintendo needs to add a way where maybe you can just do the 3-lap circuits, maybe like a 3-lap circuit cup. I think that would be an easy way to fix that. But there are so many different intermission tracks that people haven't experienced if they only play the Grand Prix mode or they only do like the 3-lap circuits. There are some really interesting interactions that go on. Like in some of the footage I'm showing you here, you will not see this in the typical local Grand Prix mode ever. So there's actually a lot of cool things that can happen in this way. But also, we are not getting the best way to enjoy the 3-lap circuits either, because it's not really great to only really be able to do it consistently through Versus Race. Because with Versus Race, there is a problem. Versus Race is fine, but there's no progression. It's not like with the typical Grand Prix race in local play where you have the star ratings you can achieve, and it's not like in online where you have a score you're continually trying to improve upon. So adding a circuit cup to both local and online play might be a great way to address this issue. And there are some really interesting 3-lap circuits in Mario Kart World that you may have never seen before or realized, because it's not something Nintendo really pushes or provides an easy way to enjoy it outside of the Versus Race. Like the Dino Jungle here, what the Tyrannosaurus Rex does in this 3-lap circuit of the area is far different than how it works whenever you do any of the different intermission tracks that tie into Dino Jungle. Or even other tracks like, for example, Spaceport. Mecha DK has different interactions as well. He positions himself in different places depending on how you're racing through that area, and there's a variety of different ways to race through that area. And so technically, you can enjoy all this content through Versus Race, but they need to do a better way so people can enjoy all these different versions of the tracks when there's some sort of progression, because that's far more satisfying and interesting. Most people don't touch Versus Race. And there's actually another significant mode to Mario Kart World that I think is only really scratching the surface here, and that's Knockout Tour. I enjoy Knockout Tour, but it's just 7 different paths. Like, yes, you're racing through different tracks, so yes, there's quite a bit of variety within these 7 different cups, but it's just 7 different cups. They can easily add more. There's no new extra content that's needed here because there's so many different possible routes you can take, and there's no way to do any other different styles of Knockout Tours. And so what can be done about this? How can Nintendo improve upon this? Well, they could simply give us the option to create our own routes. Maybe even you create your own route very quickly on the map, like you just pick from one point to another, like a drag of some kind, and that's your vote, and then everyone picks their route and you see what happens online. I think that would be the best way to do it. It would be a little bit more elaborate than just picking a track, but it's just 6 quick selections here, and if you don't pick that, then it would just be at random. And if that's too sophisticated or complex to pull off, then how about just adding more different cups without actually adding new tracks? Just different routes we can take throughout the map, because there are so many possibilities. Hundreds in theory. And yet, even with all that in mind, there is still more in Mario Kart World that Nintendo could take better advantage of. Not just adding more different cups or routes we can take with Knockout Tour, not just making the 3-lap circuits more readily accessible in some mode where there's more progression like typical Grand Prix mode or online, but also there are alternate versions of tracks throughout the map. Like, you can enter different missions in the free roam and race through some of these tracks in a different way that are not accessible in Knockout Tour or Grand Prix mode or Versus Race in any way. So there's actually way more variety that in theory you can enjoy, and Nintendo doesn't give us any way to really enjoy it outside of just a free roam mission by yourself. Like, you can race through Spaceport in reverse from the top, which is different than Mirror Mode, just so we're clear. Mirror Mode is flipping the track left to right. Racing it in reverse from the top of the map, and then you encounter Mecha DK at the end, which would be the beginning of the track normally. It's a different experience. And there's a lot of different alternate versions of tracks like this throughout the free roam. And so, in theory, not only could they add, like, a circuit cup, they could also add an alt cup, where you race alternate versions of these cups, and of course, we already have the mirror mode. And so they add all that, and then they add different Knockout Tours, or allow us to customize different routes in Knockout Tour Online. There would be so much more to enjoy in Mario Kart World without having to create new content in the game. Before we're talking about getting some sort of expansion to the game, with what's already in there, How it works currently, there's already a lot to enjoy, but there's so much more they could expand upon to take better advantage of the content that's already there. And so going back to this recent update we got on how they fixed the random mode but in some ways broke the game for people, I'm not even sure Nintendo did this on purpose. They may have just realized that the random mode wasn't truly random, so they made it truly random. But I also think Nintendo needs to think about how they are going to continually improve upon Mario Kart World throughout the years. It is the launch title for Switch 2. It is a game we expect to see DLC, because DLC is a norm for Nintendo games now. Yes, Nintendo shied away from DLC in the waning years of Switch 1, but that's because it was the waning years of Switch 1. If you're talking about during the peak prime years of Switch 1, most major Nintendo titles had DLC, including Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And so I actually think they're probably going to do even more updates and have a better plan with more structure for Mario Kart World to keep it relevant for years to come. And this is not just about paid DLC, which I do believe eventually there will be, but I also think there can be free updates. And considering everything we discussed today, all that should be free updates. And of course there's more. We've talked about in the past how they have interviewed the producer of Mario Kart World, Kosuke Yabuki, about the potential of 200cc. Are they considering that as a random update to add later on to mix up the gameplay even more? Maybe they're going to consider these different things we discussed as also additions later on, and so there may be different free updates to the game to keep it relevant, keep us coming back for more. I think this is likely. Will they handle things exactly in the way I expressed? That we don't know. But there is a lot more potential with Mario Kart World that currently is being squandered, but it can be fixed. But what do you all think? What do you expect of the future of Mario Kart World, and how do you think Nintendo will fully utilize all the content that's already there? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.